This is Joyce Jagger, the Embroidery Coach, and I want to welcome you tonight to how to create small lettering that sews out great using your embroidery fonts. And I want to welcome you to this presentation of how to create crisp, clean, small lettering that sews out great using your main keyboard embroidery fonts. Now, my goal in this presentation is to give you a much better understanding of how to work with small lettering. And in this presentation, we're going to concentrate on using your embroidery fonts and adjusting them so that they will run more efficiently, many times with a lower stitch count. In this entire small lettering presentation, I'm going to teach you about common issues of small lettering, the basic rules of small lettering, underlay stitching and pull compensation basics, adjusting the styles and recipes, and how to add a background fill under small lettering for fleece and mesh. And then I'm going to share with you my favorite backing or stabilizer recipes for left chest logos. Now, this is a program that will help you create basic lettering using the fonts in your software. I'm not going to show you any digitizing techniques. I always teach my students that you must learn how to become an editing expert before you can even think about digitizing. Now, there's a lot of basics that must be learned and fully understood before you can learn how to digitize. Learning the basics of creating lettering in your software is the very first skill that you need to master. Now, working with small lettering, small text lettering can have its challenges, but once you learn how to cope with many of the issues, it's going to be easier. Making small lettering work to your satisfaction often means making adjustments to allow for your fabric type and the size and style of the lettering that the customer is requesting. The fabric is a key element in this equation of balance, and we've got many fabric styles and types in both knits and wovens. Now, the more stable the fabric is, the easier it is for the small lettering to sew. Knits such as bouquets are tough and create many problems with small lettering, as do performance wear. Now, with these knits, the stitches want to sink into the fabric, and you have to control this with underlay and yet not create too many stitches. Now, sometimes this is by trial and error, and I have found that some small lettering needs only one line of underlay underneath it. Now, this one line of center run or perpendicular underlay will help the top stitching of the lettering sit on top of the fabric and not get lost in the fibers of the fabric. Now, in part one tonight, we're going to be covering the common issues with small lettering, the basic rules of small lettering, and underlay stitching and pull compensation basics. Now, I want to go over all of the basics first before we actually go into how to create small lettering using your embroidery fonts. And in this presentation tonight, that's exactly what we are going to do. In our next lesson, I will be doing more of the practical applications and showing you exactly how to do it. Now, common issues with small lettering. Unreasonable demands by customers. Holes that are created in the fabrics. Selecting fonts not suitable for small lettering. And giving your customer too many choices. Unreasonable demands by customers. Now, many times the customer will request a style or a size of a letter that is not acceptable for embroidery. And they are used to seeing their logos in typeset, usually in ink or screen printing, and this does not always work with needles and thread. Many times what they select is much too small. It is not uncommon for a customer to request an unreasonable number of letters, all to be placed in one line. And you have to let the customer know what will work, what will not work, and what you have to do to make changes so that their logo will be attractive. Now, what looks good on paper, as I said before, does not always look good on a garment. You need to be able to read the design when you are a few feet away from them, and it needs to be clear and legible. Now, the number of letters for one line will depend on what font style that they want and the size of the lettering. There really is no way to say it can only be an X number of letters unless you personally determine that with your software and your setups. You do not want your line of lettering for a left chest logo to be more than 4 inches. It's best to keep it 3 to 3.5 inches if at all possible. And you want it to fit within your 15-centimeter hoop for those of you that have commercial machines. And if you have to use a hoop that's larger than that for a left chest design, reduce the size of your design. If you take the time to explain to your customer exactly what you have to do, they will appreciate it and understand most of the time. You'll always have someone that will not care, but this is not the general rule. Now, holes in fabrics. Now, there's many factors that will create holes in your fabrics or your garments. The wrong type of needle, the wrong sized needle, lettering that is too small, a burr on the needle, too many stitches in your design, too many stitches in one area in your design, and the wrong type of backing. Now, with small lettering, you have to create a balance between the fabric, the needles, the thread, and the size and style of your lettering. You cannot have letters so small that you are creating stitches that will be stitching on top of each other. Now, this causes holes in the fabric, and it also causes thread breaks. Your stitch length or column width must be a minimum of 1 millimeter in order for it to sew and not create holes. Wrong sized or type of needle. Now, when your machine arrives, it's equipped with all 7511 sharp needles, and it does not matter what brand of machine. The average embroiderer continues to use these needles because this is what they think is the correct ones to use. And I tell my students to change all of their needles to 70-10 needles for smaller stitch penetration points. Now, the diameter of a 7511 needle is 0.75 millimeters. Now, this right here is an example of 7511 needle, and this little circle represents the total width of it. And right here in the center of this 4 millimeter, well, actually, this measures only 3.2 millimeters from top to bottom. This is a lowercase o. And you can see how much space that 7511 needle takes up in there. And this is the size of a 7010 needle, and this is the size of a 65-9 needle. Now, technically, letters smaller than 6 millimeters should not be sewn with any needle larger than a 7010. And 4 millimeter letters or smaller should be sewn with a 65-9 needle. And if it's a knit fabric, you should be using a ballpoint needle. And if it's a woven fabric, you should be using a sharp needle. Now, lettering too small. It's best to keep your small lettering at 6 millimeters if it's at all possible. And this is 1/4 of an inch. Now, right here, this is, both of these are blown up, obviously. This is only 4 millimeters from top to bottom, and this is 3 millimeters. Well, it's 4.3. I measured it in the software so that you could see that. From here to here is 4.3 millimeters, and the lowercase is only 3 millimeters. Now, on numerous corporate logos that are requested today, it's necessary to go below the 1/4 of an inch, and many times down as low as the 4 millimeters. the lowercase letters of a font run at 4 millimeters is about 3 millimeters, depending on the font. And this is just over 1/8 of an inch. This is extremely small. Now the center opening of a lowercase letter, such as an E or an O or a G or an A or a B, these are the centers that I'm talking about in here. They must be a minimum of 1 millimeter across. If it is not, they will cut a hole into the fabric as it is sewing. This is why it's so important to use a smaller needle. Now the smaller your needle, the clearer and cleaner your lettering will look. So remember that if the lettering is 4 millimeters or smaller, you must use a 65/9 needle, and then you change your thread to a 60 weight instead of the 40 weight. Now Madeira also offers a 75 weight thread that you would use for lettering that is 2 millimeters. And for that thread, your needle would be changed to a 65/8. And this is for lettering that you might see inside of a circle on a patch or a state or federal logo. And I've only used that one time. Now a burr on the needle. Make sure that you change your needles periodically, at least once per month. Your needles get dull. And if you touch the tip of the needle with the hoop or any other tool, you will damage the tip of that needle, and you need to change it immediately. You want to check the ends of your needles. They may have a burr on them. Sometimes they do. If this is the case, again, change it immediately, and do not forget to keep a record of the change on your needle replacement sheet. And it's a good idea when you do your weekly maintenance to go through and check all of your needles. Now here is an example of a design that was run with a burr on the needle. There's holes here, 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 down here. They're just all over the place. And you want to be very, very careful with that. Now too many stitches in your design or in one area of your design will also cause holes. If you are having your designs digitized by an outside service, as so many of us are today, make sure that you get them digitized with a medium density. If not, they are going to pack in the stitches. Many times you're going to see holes in the center of these small letters where they have too many stitches, and there are way too many stitches inside of the center of this G. If you decrease the density, this will usually help. If it does not cover enough, increase your underlay stitching, not your density. And we'll talk more about that when we are working with our letters and talking about underlay stitching. Now holes in garments can be totally avoided. And I have a checklist that you can get to use as you are sewing out each one of your designs before you actually apply them to the finished garments. And this checklist is going to help you with many of your production issues. And it's inside of the small lettering program on the website. Now, wrong type of backing or stabilizer. Now, there's a saying out there that totally annoys me and is very, very wrong. If you wear it, don't tear it. This is a saying that was started by home embroiderers, and I have heard it on the home embroidery forums. Please do not pay any attention to that, because you will not have an acceptable professional results with it, okay? You do not use cutaway backing on woven fabrics of any type. The backing shrinks, and most woven garments do not shrink. As a result, you will have puckering in your logo after it is laundered. Use 2 layers of crisp 1.5 ounce tearaway backing on all of your woven garments, and if it pulls up even the slightest, take another layer of the same backing, fold it in half, and slide it under the hoop before it starts sewing. And this is especially important on the woven fabrics that have lycra or spandex in them. This is very common in a lot of the ladies' dress shirts. Now on knit fabrics, including performance wear, use 2 layers of no-show or mesh backing and 1 layer of a 1.5 ounce crisp tearaway backing. The tearaway will help keep the small lettering flat and crisp on the knit fabric. And don't forget to add topping to your knits. Now selecting fonts suitable for small lettering. Now all of these fonts are at 5 millimeters. Now our present day fonts are digitized very well as a general rule, and we have many fonts to choose from. And I know within the Pulse and the Wilcom systems, there are over 100 basic fonts with many more available. Now many of the systems today have built-in recipes or styles. And in Pulse, your recipes or styles is an interchangeable term. And in the Wilcom software, you've got your Auto Fabric Assist. Now some fonts are not digitized to be run smaller than 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, especially if it's a 2-color font. You must be very careful in your selection of your fonts that you want to offer your customers. Make sure that you examine each one, create lettering with it, and sew it out on your embroidery machine before you make your final selection as to which ones to offer. Now, giving your customers too many choices. In each one of the embroidery software packages today, you have many lettering styles to choose from, and it's very tempting to want to show your customers all of the lettering styles that we have available. Many new embroiderers make the mistake of offering all of these styles to their customers and let them choose which ones they want to use. In order to do this, you must sew out every embroidery font that you have available and know what the capability and size restrictions are for each one. Now this takes a huge amount of time and is totally unnecessary. Remember that. Our customers get so confused when they are faced with so many choices, and I have found that the best way to handle this is to offer 2 or 3 block lettering styles and 2 or 3 script lettering styles. Now this is enough for them to choose from and will prevent the customer from being overwhelmed with your vast selection. Now when you're working with only a few lettering styles on a continuous basis, it saves you a huge amount of time in both the ordering process and in your design setup process. You can combine these fonts with your design layout templates so that the customer will be able to select the exact look and font that will work for them. Now, if the customer is not happy with the font choice, you can show them other styles, but the prices need to be higher because you do not have the time saving templates made for all of the other styles.